US President Donald Trump tells Europe to take in and put on trial up to 800 jihadists captured in a last-stand battle with the Islamic State group in Syria. Saudi Arabia agrees to invest $20 billion in Pakistan. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman arrives in Islamabad for a two-day visit to the country, building on decades of ties. And hundreds march in Paris to mark 3 months since the anti-government Yellow Vest movement began. This as police investigate protesters who were filmed hurling anti-Semitic abuse at a Jewish intellectual. Those are the headlines this hour. You're watching France 24. I'm Laura Cellier. The French government says suspected jihadists who returned to France from Syria will be tried and incarcerated. Laura Nunez spoke after a tweet by the US President Donald Trump, who said that European countries must take in and put on trial more than 800 Islamic State fighters who were captured during the final battle against the group in Syria. The so-called caliphate that once sprawled across Syria and Iraq has been reduced to an area of less than half a kilometre squared. But the battle is tricky, with thousands of civilians trapped inside. Owen Barnell has this report.
The outskirts of Baghouz lie in ruins. This exclusive footage shows one street being taken by SDF forces from ISIS group fighters. To continue on into town, Kurdish forces must drive away any remaining militants and trigger any hidden explosives.
I don't want anybody inside this perimeter.
Here the fighting is over, though another battle has already begun. Landmines lie everywhere, left by retreating militants. Every doorway, every burned-out vehicle, a potential booby trap.
Our team specializes in cleaning up the village. It's necessary for civilians, so they can eventually return.
Away from the front line, the commander of Kurdish SDF forces reports militants now only control territory in the Baghouz area, but are firmly dug in.
The situation right now is that IS group militants are holed up in a tiny area of around 700 square meters.
A small pocket of ISIS group fighters remain, but Kurdish forces say those left are using a network of underground tunnels and holding hundreds of civilians hostage. The heavy ground fighting and aerial bombardments have totally transformed Syrian villages. One is Ajin, liberated from ISIS group militants only a couple of weeks ago. For some residents now returning to what's left, the change is not always welcome.
It was a normal village under ISIS. Thanks to God, our house still stands, but no, the situation before was fine.
Though preparations are already being made for the official declaration of victory over the ISIS group, the jihadist ideology and capacity to recruit will linger long after the militants lose all territory in Syria.
European efforts to circumvent US sanctions on Iran are not enough, so says Tehran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, who's been addressing a gathering of world leaders in Munich. The European Union, along with Russia and China, are trying to salvage an international nuclear deal after Washington pulled out last year. Europe recently created a barter system called INSTEX, which is aimed at allowing European firms to continue doing business with Iran. Tehran, though, says it's not enough.
INSTEX falls short of the commitments by the E3 to save the nuclear deal. Europe needs to be willing to get wet if it wants to swim against the dangerous tide of US unilateralism.
Meanwhile, Iran's arch-foe Saudi Arabia is building on decades of close ties with Pakistan. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has kicked off a two-day visit to the country, after which he will travel to India. The Saudi royal was greeted at the airport in Islamabad by Prime Minister Imran Khan, and this is already shaping up to be a lucrative visit for Pakistan, as the kingdom has already signed an agreement to invest $20 billion. Luke Schrago has this report.
Smiles all round as Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman arrived in Pakistan, kicking off an Asia tour which is likely to be beneficial not just to Islamabad, but Riyadh in turn. On the agenda, a raft of agreements aimed at ploughing billions into the nation's energy infrastructure.
We believe that Pakistan is going to be a very, very important country in the coming future. Today we signed MOUs We believe the amount of that kind of investment is $20 billion US.
That's likely a relief to Islamabad, which is weathering a major debt crisis and currently negotiating a $12 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund. For Saudi Arabia, though, the idea is to show its business as usual, particularly given lingering Western anger over last October's murder in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul of Jamal Khashoggi. The self-exiled journalist was a fierce critic of bin Salman, and his death left the Crown Prince's reputation in tatters. As relations with traditional Western partners cooled in response to what Riyadh claimed was a rogue operation, it left the man known by his initials, MBS, seeking to prove his country still has friends elsewhere.
He's traveling the entire region with a huge delegation. The primary objective most probably is to find places where Saudi Arabia can park its disposable money, make investments for the long term, and also stagger the risk of investments.
Mohammed bin Salman will next fly to India for further discussions and is likely to round off his trip later in the week with a visit to China.
The Prime Minister of Haiti has unveiled emergency economic measures in a bid to calm 10 days of deadly protests. Jean-Henri Séan says government officials will lose their perks and he'll cut his own salary. Haitians are calling on the president to resign over corruption and poverty. A recent Senate inquiry revealed that some $2 billion went missing from a Venezuelan oil program designed to supply Haiti with cheap oil. Here's the Prime Minister urging the president to take action.
The first decision is to cut the budget for the Prime Minister's office by 30%. I suggest the Presidency and the Parliament do the same. We have also decided to scrap all unnecessary privileges allocated to high-ranking state officials, like phone and petrol expenses, useless travels abroad, and the number of consultants.
A police investigation is underway here in France after protesters on the sidelines of the Yellow Vest demonstrations were filmed hurling anti-Semitic abuse at a well-known Jewish philosopher. Over 40,000 people marched in cities across the country yesterday, and today hundreds marched in Paris to mark 3 months since the anti-government movement began. Anti-Semitism has become an unwelcome feature at these protests, which bring together members of the far right and the far left. Last week, the government warned that anti-Semitism was spreading through France like a poison, with attacks on Jews up 74% last year. Solange Moujar reports.
This is the video that's been strongly condemned by many a French citizen and the nation's politicians. It shows famed French academic Alain Finkielkraut being insulted by Yellow Vest protesters. On his way home, he happened upon a group of them Saturday, who yelled things like, "Get lost, dirty Zionist." The police soon intervened. In an interview following the altercation, the Académie Française member said he could feel their hatred. But he also sought to distinguish between those individuals and the Yellow Vest movement, which he said he initially supported. In France, the philosopher is a divisive figure, with many a controversial commentaries to his name. In 2016, he was called a fascist and kicked out of a labor reform rally. But after Saturday's insults, there's been an outpouring of support. President Macron called him and tweeted, "The anti-Semitic insults he received are the absolute negation of what we are and what makes us a great nation. We will not tolerate them." Across the political spectrum, elected officials also weighed in. On the left, socialist Benoît Hamon said he disagreed with many of Finkielkraut's reactionary ideas, but he unequivocally condemned such insults. On the right, conservative politician Laurent Wauquiez called the perpetrators despicable cretins, and Marine Le Pen blamed the incident on the far left. The video and insults come as the Yellow Vest movement celebrates its 3-month anniversary, and as many in France question to what degree it is or is becoming entwined with racism and anti-Semitism, after a series of anti-Semitic acts and an uptick across the nation in hate speech.
And finally, a World War II bomb that was found in the heart of Paris has been safely detonated. Trains in and out of the Gare du Nord station were cancelled or delayed, and hundreds of Parisians had to temporarily leave their homes. Naomi Lloyd has the story.
Paris's main ring road closed to traffic. The north of the capital at a standstill first thing on Sunday morning. Tramways and the metro all out of action after a Second World War bomb weighing 500 kilos was discovered on a construction site 10 days ago. Bomb disposal experts had so far failed to neutralise the bomb, so it was to be taken to a 7-metre deep well on the site and exploded there. Everyone living in the area just north of the Gare du Nord station, home to the Eurostar, had to leave their homes. Nearly 2,000 people packed up their bags. In this 30-storey tower block, inhabitants complained they hadn't been given enough notice.
At the last minute they came and said, everyone get out, but they knew about it well before.
Emergency services and council staff helped make sure everyone had left their homes.
We started at 6:15 and the last few came down at 8:30. People were taking their time because they had until 8:30.
There was reluctance amongst some to leave, only doing so when police came to the door. In April 1944, Allied forces bombed the north of Paris, an operation that killed more than 600 people. Their objective to stop the progress of German troops by destroying the railway. Parisian authorities made space for local people in community halls and gyms in preparation. But after the bomb was successfully detonated, residents could return home and the city's transport systems get back to normal.
And Venice has kicked off its annual carnival festivities, a costume parade floating down the city's iconic canals today, bringing in spectators from around the world. This, though, was just a preview of a bigger event, as Jenna Lee reports.
Drifting down the famous Rio de Cannaregio, gondolas carry festival goers in flamboyant costumes and masks as a part of Venice's iconic carnival. Italians, but also thousands of tourists, have come from all over the world to watch the show.
This carnival is unique. There are many places where they try to copy it, but here there's historic value. The carnival was born here, and you can see the difference.
In your bucket list of things to do at least once in your life, in a lifetime.
The carnival reportedly began in the 11th century. Abandoned hundreds of years later, it made a comeback in 1979. It's since become one of the city's major attractions.
Seeing all the people with their own outfits on, enjoying the food around town, and the parade last night was also very good.
I'm so happy to see a lot of people wearing different costumes, masks, and the Venetian gowns, and it's so amazing.
Saturday evening, the floating nighttime parade kicked off this year's festivities. 2019's theme is Blame the Moon, a nod to Shakespeare's play Othello and a celebration of 50 years since man first set foot on the moon.
Impressive scenes from Venice there. Well, that's it from the newsroom for now. Do stay tuned, though. Much more still to come here on France 24.